Hey there, before we get into the episode, just a couple of things. Make sure you subscribe so you get all the episodes to begin with. Also, join me for in-depth conversations at growth.com/community. That's grief, the numeral 2, growth.com/community. Another thing is on Substack, growth2growth.substack.com, where you can get a lot more content from me and actually engage with the community there as well. And now, on to the podcast. Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Grief to Growth, where we delve into life's profound questions, exploring the realms of existence, loss, and the mysteries that lie beyond. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and today we have an exceptional guest whose experiences and insights promise to really enlighten and inspire us. Join us as Regan Forston, a distinguished clinical hypnotherapist and former board member of the Michael Newton Institute, which is an organization dedicated to uncovering the secrets of the afterlife. He's certified in quantum healing hypnosis technique through Dolores Cannon School. Regan has guided countless individuals through transformative journeys, including life between lives and past life regressions. And if you don't know what life between lives are, that's what we're going to talk about today. His spiritual path was ignited by an out-of-body experience, at the age of 4, which set the stage for a life rich in spiritual exploration. So in today's episodes, what we plan to cover is the afterlife unveiled, insights that come from over 70,000 life between lives sessions conducted worldwide. And those reveal what happens after death and during that interlude before we reincarnate. We're going to talk about Regan's own journey to the afterlife as he chronicled in his book, 3 Hours, 33 Minutes in Heaven, and the profound lessons that he returned with. We'll talk about healing through hypnosis, how techniques like quantum healing hypnosis can address physical ailments and emotional traumas by accessing altered states of consciousness. And we'll talk about practical spirituality, because we know we like to be practical here. So we're going to talk about methods to activate your God switch, enabling a deeper connection with the divine through practices such as hypnosis, dreams, and soul travel. So this conversation transcends the concept of the afterlife. It's really about embracing intentional living, finding healing, and understanding the soul's expansive journey. And remember that our dialogue doesn't end here. After the episode, I invite you to join our community at grieftogrowth.com/community, where we continue to talk about things like this and this episode itself. So with that, I'd like to welcome Regan Forston.
Oh, so thank you, Ryan. That was a nice introduction.
Thank you. It's really good to have you here. This is a topic we like to talk about, all the big stuff. And people have heard about the afterlife. We've heard a little bit about reincarnation, but most people may not be familiar with the term life between lives. So could you explain to people, first of all, what does that actually mean?
Sure. We call that, in the research that we've done, what we found out is that with these 70,000 people all having basically the same experience, that where God creates us is in over there, and back what we call home. Now our true home is heaven or the afterlife. And we're just down here as soul having experience. So this body we have is just temporary. We're having experience where we're learning to grow to be more, sometimes for some people very slowly, and sometimes for other people very quickly, about being better, being more loving, kind, compassionate human beings.
Mm-hmm.
This whole thing we're finding out, it's all about soul having experience. We find out there's not really good or bad experiences, they're just experiences. Some of them we take to think is bad because they're difficult or hard to get through, and some are kind of easy. But it's mostly in the difficult things where we do the most learning. That's where we become more aware of who we really are. and what the meaning of life is and everything. So what's beautiful, we found about the other side. So when we talk about reincarnation, well, in a sense, when people say we only have one life, that's really true. We just have one life with many bodies, or one life with many experiences, because we're created over there. So in other words, it's like an actor that decides to, oh, I'm going to explore this part of myself by taking this acting role, and they go through this thing, but then the play ends eventually, and they're sad and everything like this. But then they go back to square one, and they all of a sudden they go, okay, now what I want to do next, that way. Grief, especially, so many people are going through grief. And in my regular therapy practice, anybody out there that needs some help, if the grief is like debilitating, I mean, grief is normal and real. Okay, and it's just one of the things we have to go through in life. But sometimes the grief can be so bad that it keeps you from moving on, or you're not able to function right because of that. There's some beautiful energy psychology techniques which are on my website. See, with traditional therapy, and they help you to manage that, so that you take the worst part of it. You can ditch. You don't have to go through that. With all these with all the research that we've done, like I said, we found that that's our home. We're just down here having experience. And the thing that we've discovered too is that most of the roadblocks that come up in your life, you've actually chosen to go through. In other words, a lot of souls, they decide that they're going to have a life where they can learn, a particular thing. Like when I was on the other side, I confirmed, which I kind of already knew. And that's the thing. A lot of times when people are before council over there, which I'll explain how that is over there, and you get to clarify what your mission in life is, and get to check to see how you're doing. Like, are you on task, or have you gotten off? Because some people have kind of derailed a little bit, and over there they help them to give them suggested things of how to get back on the path again. So when you find out what your mission is. Like I found out that I came down here to learn kindness. In other words, my number one thing was to learn selflessness, kindness. And I realized that's what I'd been doing. So I asked them, I said, I had a council of, gosh, now I'm thinking I can picture my main guy that I was talking to. He was Chinese looking gentleman, late C is who I call him. And I said, how am I doing? And they said, well, we're really proud, Regan, that you're doing what you came down here to do. You're doing pretty good. And that made me feel good. But then I said, is there anything I'm missing? Like I'm trying to be a good person. I know it's been difficult for me because I remember when I was younger, I was a lot more selfish than I am now. And I've always been kind of aware of my selfishness, and been trying to, consciously work on it, that way. And they said, yeah, you're missing one thing, Regan. And I said, what's that? And he says, you could be a better grandfather. And when they said that, I did, when I came out of my session of being on the Afterlife for over 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even remember that. But when I listened to my recording, because when I help people have this experience, we record it all, because so much happens that you'll remember the highlights, but there's a lot of really golden nuggets that are in there. And so by listening to it again, so when I listened to it again and they said that, and I realized, wow, I said, I have 9 grandchildren, but I never really had grandparents, so to speak. We just went there on Thanksgiving and said hi, and that was about it. I was never very close to them. So that was my role model. So that's what I was being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I found out since I took their advice, oh my gosh, in the last 7, 8 years now, since my experience there, I've developed some pretty good relationships with my grandchildren, and I found out that grandparents are pretty important in kids' lives. So the things you find out over there, it's like, okay, to do this in an organized way so it doesn't get too confusing for people. First, I'll explain that we found out that this process of visiting the afterlife, the place we go in between lives, is a natural process. That's why it's 80% successful on the very first try for most people that have not experienced it. And then some people need to come back for a second or a third. I've had a couple in 9 years now. I've had 2 people come back for 4 sessions, and then they had the blowout, beautiful experience. Most of those are guys that have trouble. It's us men. We have a little harder time kind of just, getting deep, being vulnerable and allowing it to happen. The process we use is simple. It's the process of falling asleep, which you do every night. People are just listening to my voice, and as I suggest to them that they can feel the tension in their head and their neck and their shoulders leaving their body, and they're just relaxing. And we go through every part of the body. And that's what happens when you sleep. You don't just reach over and hit a switch and fall asleep. It's a process of going down and down and down. And where that happens is at the bottom of the breath. Now, people have never thought of this before because we just breathe normally. We've never thought about this process of the breath. When you get down to the very bottom of the breath, and people, I want you to realize this now, notice that there's a moment of hesitation before you take another breath. Well, in that little split second before you take another breath, there's nothing, no muscles are moving in your body. Your body isn't having to work at all for that little second. You can just feel the relaxation. And right at there, where your body has no stress on it at all, it's relaxed. Each time you get down there, the body goes a little deeper, a little deeper. So what I do is I have people stay in that special. This will help people have trouble getting to sleep too. Is you just watch the breath. You get all the way down to the bottom, and you just stay there. It's so peaceful and quiet and relaxing for 3 or 4 seconds. And then you breathe in again. And I tell people, it says, just feel your body begin to relax as it does when you get down the bottom of the breath. So the induction we use is a little longer, actually a lot longer than most hypnotic inductions. Like if someone came to me to stop smoking and lose weight, all I do is I do a quick 5 or 10 minute induction just to get them kind of semi-relaxed. And that's when the subconscious becomes to the surface as much as the conscious mind, and you can talk to it and make changes. Well, this process, to get to that part where you kind of have like a God switch where you can access all the memories of everything you've ever done before in this life and in other lifetimes, and your memories of being in the in-between. In other words, that's why we call it life between lives, is taking people to that place we go, heaven or the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, where we go in before we decide to or not to decide, as we found out in our research, because some people decide they're done with that and they're just going to continue their work in the afterlife, which there's thousands of things to do over there. It's so busy. It's like a beehive behind the scenes over there, Brian, of all the things that souls can do in the other dimensions or other in heaven and so forth. That's the thing with reincarnation now. Reincarnation is even though we just have one life with many bodies, in the other way of looking at it from our regular consciousness, reincarnation is real, that we come back time and time and time again. And sometimes these sessions are worth the price of admission for someone just to realize, to experience a past life. And then they go, wow, now I understand myself more. I understand where I came from, kind of more like what my experiences were in other lifetimes. In a session, the way we get to the afterlife is by having somebody recall a life they had before. We kind of do a treatment of it, go through 3 or 4 scenes in that life. Then we have them go to their death scene. And what they do is they see themselves pass away. They're out of their body, looking down at their body. And then this is where the life between life process really begins. What I'll say to the people is I'll ask them about what they learned. And I'll say, I'll say every life has a meaning and purpose. And in that life you just lived, what was your lesson? And everybody will just in trance or something, and they'll talk about what they learned in that lifetime. And then I'll say, okay, now, are you ready to go home? And sometimes this is what's interesting in our research. Some people say, no, I'm not ready to go home yet. And I'll say, why? And he says, well, because so-and-so down here is grieving so bad, I need to stay around and let them know that I'm okay. And so I'll say, okay, I want you to do that. And when you're finished, let me know and we'll continue. So I'm just there being quiet. And then all of a sudden this is, okay, I'm done. And on our research, we always say, okay, what did you do? The most common way souls get in touch with us, and I don't know if you had this experience, Brian, is in the dream state, because that's when we're kind of relaxed and in that same state that I get people in when we do this process. They'll say that souls have the ability to put themselves. You could be having a total nonsense dream, and all of a sudden, boom, there's your daughter, there's your mom, or something, just smiling at you, or something, and there's something deep inside you that kind of knows that's real, that's them. It's not just your imagination. When you wake up, so many times people say, "Oh, I just." Like, especially at funerals, so many times people say, "Oh, I can just feel that dad's here. I can just feel mom's energy," and they are actually feeling that, because usually people are, stay at their funeral before they go back to the other side. So we're finding out all kinds of cool stuff. One case was kind of cool. Um, when I asked the person, like, well, what did you do to let your wife know that you were okay? And he says, well, I used to have this thing when I was alive. She'd be reading. She was a reader, always read books, always in her chair or something. I would sneak up behind her and I'd blow on her ear like this. And she'd go, oh, honey, like this. That was kind of our little joke or a little thing. So when he passed on, he says, no, I got to stick around. And that's exactly what he did. He just used all of his soul energy or something and thinking about everything. And he says, all of a sudden she goes like this, and she goes, you're there, aren't? That's you, isn't it? That's you. And then I knew she was going to be okay. So then what I say to them, I says, okay, now let's rise above that scene until you can see landscape in the long distances. And I'll say, tell me what happens next. I said, turn around. Who's there to take you back home? And all of a sudden they'll say, oh, my guide's here, or my mom's here, or, somebody that's there to take us to the guide or something. And so when we meet the guide, this is beautiful in this experience. Almost every single person of the hundreds that I've done now, these, Brian, has been able to come face to face with, we call it their personal guide. It's like everybody has one. And that's so, when people have this experience and they realize they're never alone from that moment on, when they come back and they start really living their mission, it's so comforting to know that there's always somebody watching out for you. So sometimes there's like a team up there that's rooting for you, to get to your mission and to learn what you need to learn. And so a lot of times we'll get the names of the guides, and then here's what so blows my mind, Ryan. Okay, so my client is there in beginning to get to the afterlife, and they're standing next to who just passed, who they were that they just passed away. In other words, they have this consciousness, and they're looking at who they were in that past life that's just left that body. Okay, and then you have the guide there. So then we say, okay, that person who they were then, are they ready to go back home? And so we can now switch to who they are now, and they'll say yes. And so that person there goes back, to the afterlife. And then with the guide, we say, well, now we want to concentrate on who this soul is now. And we know that there's a council we can ask to go through to get questions answered. There's a soul group where they can visit people that have passed on, and that sort of thing. And we'll ask the guide, which should he go to first? And the guide will usually say one or the other. I would say about 50-50, whether they go to what we call a soul group first, or they go to the council. So let's say the guide says the council. Well, it happens instantaneous. And then when the guide says council, I know my client's at the council now immediately. So I'll ask my client, because for research, we're always asking, okay, what's it look like where you're at? Are you inside or outside? Most of the time, almost 90% of the time, people describe this council place as a big open place, but it's inside. It kind of reminds me of what I would think of a Greek temple or something, where it's marble, like marble floors, marble walls, or like some of the court system, like down here when you're in court. You know, it's kind of that's a little bit like an image of kind of like what it is when you're before a council of elders. Um, Now, this council of elders is so cool, Brian. Every council is unique to the person. I've never had two councils that have been the same, except I've been to the Afterlife 2 times now, and I had the same council both times, so that was pretty cool.
Hmm.
That was pretty consistent. So, um, and then I'll say, okay, now the council members count them from left to right, and they'll tell me like how many. It's usually anywhere from about 3 to maybe 12. Some people have 12, but generally speaking, it's like 3, 4, 5, 6, on there. And I'll have them describe them to me. Now, here's the thing that makes these sessions so real, Brian, is that they start seeing things they couldn't have made up in their imagination because they're thinking, most of us think of a council and you think of seeing everybody just like we're seeing each other right now. But I would say about half the time, the council are energy forms. But when you're in that state, it's just natural to see, you recognize them as energy. And so, and sometimes it's like, they're partial energy and they'll appear to you like human, but maybe from the waist up human and then energy below. Sometimes you just see a face. Sometimes it's just energy. But when you're in that state, you recognize them as individual souls, individual beings. So then we'll say, okay, now my client has some issues in their life they'd like to address. Should we address, is there one of the council in particular we should address to? Most of the time they say, oh, just ask us, the questions to the group, of that. And so then we just start going through the questions. And I've had a few people hesitant to do a life between life process because they know they've done a lot of crazy things in their life and they're kind of afraid of being judged or something awful is going to happen or they're going to feel shame. I'll tell you, Brian, up there, this heaven, this place up there, we all these thousands, the 70,000 we've done, people always just experience love. It's just love and light over there. There's no condemnation. They're just there to help. It's like let's say if you were a good parent and your child does something wrong and you're just a loving parent, it would be like treating them like that, not like mean or horrible or anything like this. And also too, since this question always comes up in people's minds, what about hell? What about, aren't people like, isn't there some kind of crazy stuff? Where all this happens is above all that. I mean, there's no devil in heaven. There's no negative anything like that. It's just what you would hope it would be. And that's what people say sometimes coming back from the session. They says, I've never felt such love in my life before. It's almost like there's a constant, like someone pouring love on you while you're there. And you just feel connected and you kind of feel like you don't want to come back. In a way. Now everybody does. We back because they know they have a mission to do and everything. But it's a feeling, and that's one thing when people come back. So many people, they go, gosh, whenever it's my time to go, man, I'm ready. But I know I need to be here, because I have work to do. When it's time to graduate, like the fear of death just leaves, because you see and get proof that you're an immortal soul, that you never die. You just leave this body and actually go back home again,
Right.
Now, in talking about this, this is what always happens, Brian. There's always these little branches. Like one thing will remind me of one thing and one thing. So just feel free to break in there if you need to clarify me or if I've got off of what
No,
you're
I think you've done a great job of describing it. And it is something I guess a lot of us don't really, we haven't grown up with this. Reincarnation has been accepted in the East for a long time, but not so much in the West. And it's becoming more accepted here. There's still some religious pushback against it. I wonder if you've come across any of that, where people will say, no, the Bible says that, we only live one life. And I love the way you put that. We do live one life, right? But in multiple bodies.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm testing out a new feature. I'd love to get your feedback on it. It's called Fan Mail, and you can send me a message right from the show notes of the podcast. So look for the link that says send me a text. You can ask a question for a future podcast. You can suggest a guest or just give me any feedback you want. Just remember, it is one way. I can't text you back, and I will not have your name, your email address, or your phone number unless you include it in the message. Let me know what you think.
Right. Yeah. Because see, we have a sense of looking at things from the earth viewpoint. Okay. But when you look at things from the heavenly viewpoint, then it all makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
that way. But I've had a few people come to me that I've had quite a few Christians that have come to me when they've heard me on podcasts and things like that. And there's something that rings inside them and they go, you know what, I think what this guy's saying, it seems to fit somehow. I can't quite explain it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll tell them, I says, okay, well, this is just the process we do of going through the past life. I says, you can just allow yourself to think you just made it all up or something. That's okay. It's the point is to get to that. But because of the fact when you're in that past life, now people experience the past life different ways. Some people are totally in that body and they're feeling everything that they used to feel when they were that other person. Other times, spirit or soul will kind of have you watch it like you're watching it on a movie screen, but so you kind of feel you're that character, but in a sense you have a little distance from it, and it's like you're going through a book of memories, of pictures of that life and seeing it. But oh boy, I there's so many cases I've had that have just made me feel so. I'm so lucky to do this work, Brian, because I've had hundreds of people now, and I'm sitting next to them, and they're in the afterlife, and having this experience with their guides, and they're having their so much clarity that they get about their current life and everything. And so in a sense, I feel I've been to heaven hundreds of times because vicariously through their experience, I kind of feel myself there, and what they're learning, and I go, oh wow, I didn't know that myself.
Yeah.
Questions we ask and everything. So it's I mean, I went from being a comedian for 30 years to doing this. So um it was but again, when I look back at how I came to this, it all made sense after a while because I was an actor for a lot of years in Hollywood, and I was a fake motivational speaker for companies. And as a ventriloquist, I did company corporate roasts all over America. And it was the time of my life. I mean, my my two sisters are nurses. My brother's a physical therapist, and they always used to tease me that I help people heal through laughter. You know, but then when that all changed in 2008, when the financial thing happened, companies stopped hiring comedians like me because they felt like guilty was paying all this money when they were having a hard time staying afloat.
Yeah.
I was guided to a little 2-line ad in a paper that said, learn how to hypnotize for free. And I thought, wow, see, I used to have a talent agency years ago, and I booked hypnotists. Sometimes they could do a nightclub for a year and stay in that one place, because even though they do have the same template for a show, that you have different people that come up to be hypnotized every time. So it's got a different flavor every time,
Right. Right.
Okay, I could do that. I could do that, and I could get some work, but when I went to hypnotherapy school, and all of a sudden I learned how the mind works. And I learned that our minds are changeable. It's like if we have a program in there that's not working, you can go in and get rid of the program and put in a new one. And I thought, why don't they teach that in school? Why don't we, this is so amazing how how much power we have over our mind, and how we can fix things that are broken and put things in that are right. We can stop bad habits. We can become better people when we learn how to blend our conscious mind and our subconscious mind more consciously. And so something in me went, you know what? I think I want to help people do that instead of making them quack like ducks. And so that's when I took off into just a regular hypnotherapy practice. So people would come to me once in a while when I had my regular hypnotherapy practices. Look, I hear in hypnosis you can do past life regression. I said, yeah. So I started, and had a few people come to me, and they just went right to a past life, and it was like, wow. I mean, I was surprised as them. I went, this is really cool, you know. And then when I was on my deathbed, they thought I had stage 4 cancer. I was in the hospital, and I thought, and I didn't. It ended up being something called valley fever, which you can only get in parts of California, Arizona, a little bit of Mexico. You could be driving down the freeway, and if you breathe in a spore of this, whatever it is, and it just starts growing in your lungs. And when you're over 60, it's fatal a lot of times. They thought my lungs were all cloudy and everything. So they thought it was, and I never smoked and that kind of thing. So, but anyway, they did a biopsy, and they found out it was this other thing. But while I'm laying there for 2 months in the hospital, I remembered reading this book, which I want everybody out there, if you can get a copy, there's a million out there copies, called Journey of Souls. And Michael Newton wrote it, and it's about how this whole thing started. There's a bunch of case histories in there. And the way he lays it out, I'll tell you, that book has changed lives. When people read that, it just resonates. Something resonates, and people just go, oh my gosh, maybe the afterlife really is real. Maybe, maybe I'm down here for a purpose, So anyway, Journey of Souls, and also Destiny of Souls. Between the two of them, there's a million out there, copies out there. It's a very good books, and it's all about this research and everything. Anyway, now I'm going to digress a bit because thoughts are coming to me. When I went to a second time, and this is so cool because this process is so easy now that anytime I feel the need that I need some counseling, or my life's gotten kind of balled up and I need some help or some guidance, all I have to do is do another life between life session and get the answers. I mean, I always ask over there, says, is my client welcome to come back? And they said, come back anytime you need to, like I've been twice, my wife's been twice now. Even in our relationship, it's helped that bloom because we see our why the reasons are we're together. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing. Okay, now something's telling me to say this. The thing that I think is the coolest thing we've learned about this process is that when people go through this process, which is mostly successful, they get to go to their soul group. And the soul group is kind of like, it's like souls that over, who knows how long of time, if we're thinking of time, but they're souls that you're most close to in the afterlife. I think of it as like an acting troupe. You're all the best buddies, and everybody's helping each other to learn. And so you'll help them, your friends, with what their goals are by going down and maybe being their mother or their father, or their brother or whatever. And a lot of times you'll pick certain ones there to be your, because we choose. A thing we found in the research is generally we choose our parents. And sometimes you go, you're kidding me, man. My dad was a horrible thing. Well, oh boy, that's another story there. I'll tell you in a minute. Remind me about that in a minute. But
okay.
What we find out is this group that's there. I have people make a list of people they want to talk to on the other side, people that have passed on, they want to have conversations with. But here's the thing. Brian, when you decided to be Brian and come down and be yourself and have a mission of things you wanted to learn in life, you didn't put all of your soul self into your human body. You kept about half of yourself back home. What that means is we all have higher selves. We all have that other part of us that's not in the physical body. And so when you're on the other side, you can actually have conversations with the soul selves of people still alive in your life. You can have a conversation with your wife. You can have a conversation with your coworkers, whoever you want. And sometimes what I add is just kind of a fun thing to do. I'll say, is there anybody in history that if you could have a conversation with them, you would like? A man recently came to me and says, oh my God, I'd want to talk to Tesla because I've got this new invention I have that's going to do something great for the world. So when he's on the other side, I asked the counsel, I says, could my client have a talk with Tesla a little bit? And they said, sure. He has this 15-minute conversation with Tesla talking about his invention and everything. He didn't like what Tesla told him because Tesla said, to him, said, look, your invention is really great, but it's ahead of its time right now. And you're not going to make any money on this because people aren't ready for it. It's not to accept. But he says, you have to invent this still because that's part of you that's helping to propel the world forward. And eventually what you are doing is probably going to help humanity. So that really helped him because he's saying, well, maybe I don't need to mortgage my house then. What he's going to do. But so what that means is that anybody who's ever lived before, there's always part of them in heaven. So even if they've reincarnated again and they're doing something else down here, that soul self of them is always there. You know, now people that are Christian, again, I'll say, hey, do you want to talk to Jesus while you're there? And they go, you mean I could do that? And I go, sure. So every single person that's been Christian that's wanted to talk to Christ, after we're done with the council, we say, now my client would really like to talk to Jesus for a little bit. Is that possible? Instantly, Jesus appears. I'll tell you, to the Christians that have come, sometimes that's been, I mean, tears coming. I've been getting emotional thinking about this because I'm watching my clients just have tears coming down. And because they can feel this being, this Jesus, is a real being, a really evolved soul, and the love that he, just by him looking at them or by holding them, it's almost overwhelming emotionally for people. So yeah, and usually what they're doing. Well, I had one time, I had a woman, she was a Christian, 72-year-old Catholic woman, a beautiful soul. I mean, she just lights up her room when she comes in. And she was having trouble in the physical world with her daughter. Her daughter kind of ghosted her a bit, and she was just in pain because she loves her daughter so much. So she's there, she's talking to Jesus. All of a sudden, Mother Mary shows up, just unannounced. And so she's having this conversation with Mother Mary, and they're talking about their kids. And Mother Mary's talking about Jesus when he was a baby and a boy. She's talking about her daughter, just like they're having these two moms talking about their kids. And so she asked Mother Mary about why she's having trouble with her daughter. And Mother Mary says, okay, when the next time you see your daughter, you need to talk to her not as your daughter, but as like an equal, as like an equal adult. And she says, just listen to her. Don't try to solve her problems. You know, don't be the mom and say, well, you need to do this. She says, just be a good listener. That's what your daughter needs. She wants an equal, so someone that will listen to her. Okay, I checked with her a few months later. Her and her daughter her daughter came over for Thanksgiving or Christmas, one of those, and she was just listening to her daughter the whole time. Says somehow something mended there, and you know, so that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.growth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it.
But usually Jesus, he just holds people, say, you know, how can I feel your presence even more? I don't want to leave this presence. And he says, look, all you have to do is think of me. And when you have this think of me, I'm with you. Okay. You'll feel my love. Okay. So it's, that was just to digress a little bit about that, because we're a Christian country, you know, a lot more Christian than anything else. One of my clients was Christian, but she says, well, you know what? I've been studying Buddhism a little bit, and I wondered, is Buddha here? I said, well, let's find out. I mean, this was so much fun in the research because we're just saying, let's just see what we can do here, you know? So we asked the council if she could see Buddha. Boom, there he was. I said, what does he look like? He was a glowing orb of purple. It was like blue, purple, standing in kind of like a human form, but with no facial features or anything. And then what Buddha did was, all of a sudden, he shoots it's like a tube of purple from right from here right into her thing here. So she's in trance. And oh, you should have seen her face. She's just like, it was like she was getting an infusion of love or something. It was like totally amazing. When she came out of trance and we're talking about, she says, "Man, my head is still feels like it's this big right now," you know.
Hmm.
And she was just feeling the love of Buddha. And so we asked Buddha. We said, "Look, Buddha, have you reincarnated here?" And Buddha just says, "Part of me is everywhere," you know.
Hmm.
So now we're talking about religion. A lot of times people are before the council and they'll go, "Okay, I'm okay, council. Now here I am in heaven a little bit. Tell me the one best religion. You know, what I'm going to go down. And that's what I'm going to do, you
Yeah.
know." And they'll kind of look at you and they'll say, "Well, if you need a religion, that's great. That's fine. You can find one that, find one that resonates with you. That's great, but it's not necessary." They'll say the one true religion, Brian, is love and kindness. You know,
Hmm.
find it, you know. And some people, for their mission, because they have to learn certain things, they have to go through certain things, and they have to look at the world a certain way. They'll be drawn to a particular religion that has those things that they can, be taught.
Right.
Uh, so, and then people say, "Okay, I know I'm going back on my physical body here pretty quick. But how am I going to stay connected? I don't want to leave. I want to feel this feeling all the time." And 100%, I always know, I say, I'm not going to tell my clients, I say what they're going to tell you, but I know what they're going to tell you. And they always do. They'll say that meditation is the gift that God's given us that can help us to stay closer, more connected to the other side than anything else. Because when people meditate, they actually get into almost the similar or same state as the state when we do this life between lives thing. In other
Hmm.
words, it's kind of, if you're just awake this way, but when you get into meditation, um, you're actually, this is a good thing too I'm thinking of guys that might be watching this podcast now. Uh, Here's what happens when you have this life between life process. We're hooked up to a machine. Right now we're in the beta state, as a lot of people are familiar with beta, alpha, theta, delta. Okay, as you begin to meditate, all of a sudden you would start seeing alpha waves start coming in. Okay. And when you get into real deep meditation, here comes some theta waves. Okay. And in this process, that's what happens. Like people get so relaxed. And if I wasn't talking to them and communicating, they would just fall asleep there on my couch and they would, but because I'm communicating with them, I keep people in that theta state. And
Hmm.
that's where it seems, Brian, that's where we seem to have the switch where we can go to past lives. We have memories of everything, that's the door right there in that little bit of theta state. So that's physically what's happening to our minds that way.
Hmm.
So it's it's great that way. Um, when I think about and when I had my session, I was not successful the first time. Okay, because I'm so analytical, Brian. As my facilitator was trying to help me get in the state. Okay, this is my mind talking. I go, okay, now why is he saying that? Okay, oh, does that make sense? Okay, blah blah blah. Okay, now what? Okay, I'm seeing some images. Am I just making it up? I don't know what's going on here. I just couldn't relax and allow it to happen.
Hmm.
4 days later, though, I had a few of these amazing other therapists that kind of worked with me on some stuff. And so there were 16 of us going through the training of this at the same time. On the fourth day, they said, "Okay, tomorrow you're all going to heaven and back." Okay. So I already was a little bit apprehensive because when I went to hypnotherapy school in Los Angeles, which I went to the most accredited hypnotherapy school in the country, is where I got my training or initial hypnotherapy training.
Hmm.
I was the last one in the class to experience hypnosis. I mean, I would every time they wanted to volunteer, I'd raise my hand, I'd go up, nothing, 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 and everybody else it was no problem. I
Hmm.
just bothered me because I thought, am I ever going to experience? If I'm going to be a hypnotist, I want to know what hypnosis is like for myself. You know,
Sure.
but eventually, I think it was about the 11th time over like 3 months, I volunteered and I went up. And here's what he did. He said, let's see here. He says, hold your hands out in front of you like you have a tray. across them. And he says, close your eyes. And then he takes some deep breaths and he says, okay, now, Regan, on your right wrist, I'm tying this really big helium balloon on there. And your right hand feels so light. It's so light. You could keep it there for days, just letting it float. And in your left hand, I'm putting a Los Angeles telephone book. Now, I want you to see that telephone book. You know how heavy that is. I want you to feel that and how hard that is to hold up. And you can feel your muscles this hard, and the harder you try to hold it up, the harder it is. Okay, so he's saying that to me. So in my mind, I'm going, well, I know what he's wanting me to do. He's wanting me to go like this, like feel the weight pushing down. I said, I'm not going to do that because that's not hypnosis. What the hell's going on here? So he kept talking to me. Then he had me open my eyes and my hands were like this, Brian. And I went, what the?
Yeah.
Because I didn't consciously do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized my subconscious was listening to him and feeling that phone book and feeling how heavy it was. And it went down. The whole time I thought hypnosis was something different than it is. And that's why, it's so simple. It's just allowing yourself to get relaxed. And when you're relaxed, your subconscious gets totally to the front, just like your conscious mind. And it's like there's two of us here, my subconscious and my conscious mind. So from then on, so anyway, getting back to my life between life experience, on the 3 or 4 days later, they said, well, let's try again, Regan. After the first time, I know when I went back to class the next day, every single person was talking about being in heaven. And they were just, oh my, and I'm sitting there like, okay, I didn't, and I'm feeling like, is this ever going to happen? Second time, we got to, excuse me, I got to the past life. So I'm thinking in my mind, because you're conscious the whole time of everything that's going on. In other words, it's like you're in two places at once. I'm listening to the facilitator, but here I am in this past life. I did it like what I saw, and I started crying. That's what made it so real, Brian, because I was actually a Roman soldier. I can feel just now when I just say that, I can feel my legs spread. I'm on this really powerful horse, and I'm going up and down, and there's people that are being crucified. And in my mind at the time, I was justified. I felt, well, it's my orders. I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm a soldier. I'm supposed to be killing these guys because they're crazy. But then on my deathbed, this is where I realized I can see myself. I'm on like a table. It's about, it's like a little taller than the eating table, but I'm just laying there. My daughter's next to me. I know she's my daughter. She's got this long hair, almost down to her waist, straight hair. She looked like she's in her 30s or something. She's holding my hand as I'm dying. And on my deathbed, I cursed Caesar, and I swore. I says, never again am I ever going to do something that inwardly I really know is wrong to do just because somebody tells me to do it. And that was my lesson in that lifetime. So anyway, that's the thing, people. If you go to a past life, we've not always been the saints that we are now. We've done a lot of mayhem sometimes. But you have to look at it as a growth. In other words, we were immature and selfish and everything at one time, and now we've learned through incarnation after incarnation that love is the key. We've loved, and now we're who we are now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I see myself pass away, and then when I turn around to see my guide or something there, all of a sudden I'm just in blackness. It's like I felt like I felt good. I mean, it felt like I'm just floating, but I was seeing nothing but black. Luckily, the facilitator that I had another facilitator helping him. And that second facilitator says, just let Regan be in the black for a while. And we found out that the black is an actual place, Brian. Like, in other words, when you pass away, in a sense, it's like going from earth to heaven. There's like a little space here. Well, some people go right away, and other people, they're in the black for a little while. It's like a little holding area for a while before.
Mm-hmm.
The really trained facilitator that was helping, my new facilitator was helping me have this session. He says, just let him in. And the facilitator, the main facilitator, took over and says, Regan, just float around a little bit and just enjoy it because it's a beautiful place. Excuse me. And Let us know if you see any light anywhere or anything. Well, all of a sudden, I saw like a pinpoint in the very distance, about the size of a pea, of red light.
Hmm.
And, oh, there's some red light. And the facilitator says, well, just float over to that light. And in a nanosecond, boom, I was out the other side, and there was my guide, Rebazar, who took me on this beautiful journey experience that I had over there. So that was a good learning experience for me. And oh boy, when I came out of that, I was elated because I did it. I did it. I was able to do it. And I'd have to say that the experience of being over there and what happened, especially the few highlights that have the thing about me being a good grandfather, helped me down here on earth this way.
Hmm.
But the biggest experience I had was just as at the council answered my questions, I got to see my mother, my father, my brother, who have passed on. I got to see them for a little bit over there, which made me feel good.
Mm.
Seeing them right now in my mind, and this is so cool. Just like I'm seeing them see me right now, Brian. They're wonderful people in my life. So I'm above the earth. It's like I'm in space, and I'm looking down at the earth. My guide is still with me here on my right, Rebazar. And as I'm floating down, kind of coming back from the experience, I was looking at the earth, and I was from space. It's just the most beautiful, peaceful looking, coolest thing, just this globe floating out there. So Rebazar says to me, he says, are you sure that in your mission, are you sure you want to do what your mission is? And I screamed, yes, I was just with all my beingness, yes. And I knew he meant this work, the work that I'm doing now,
Hmm.
that I did. And so then I'm getting a little closer to Earth after I said that. And all of a sudden, in my experience, I'm starting to feel all this pain, all this emotional pain as I get closer to Earth. He stops me for a minute. He says, Regan, now that you've opened yourself up here, you're starting to feel the pain of the Earth right now. And it made me think at that very moment, Brian, looking down at Earth, of all the emotional pain that's going on down there now with people, with the wars and dying and people fighting and all that. And he says, if you're going to do work, Regan, you're going to do four things I'm going to recommend you do, or your physical body won't be able to handle it and your physical body will die. So I said, okay, let's just hold on a minute here. Let's talk about this. He says, and this will help people too, because this isn't just for me, but everybody as they wake up, and this will help them to get through their day in a way where you kind of connect yourself to your higher self, to heaven, so you be a better person in the day. He says, as you wake up, Regan, the first thing I want you to do as you open your eyes is connect to the other side. And I heard a prayer in my mind. This is so cool. It was, bless this day and those that I serve as I keep one foot in heaven and one foot planted firmly on earth to accomplish my mission. He says, just a little prayer, boom, you're connected for the day. Okay.
Mm.
So the second thing he said was, spend more time in nature. He said that's God's gift to all of us. And we instinctively know that, Brian, that somehow when we go to a park or we go hiking in the woods or something, there's something healing about that, and the image they showed me in my mind was an hourglass. Okay. You know how sand goes in the top and it goes through a little tiny thing to the bottom?
Hmm. Sure.
And backing up a little bit, when he said that you're gonna die if you don't do these things, all of a sudden I saw that hourglass, and I was seeing clients, and the sand was piling up, and nothing was going through to the bottom. So when he told me these four things to do, as I heard that prayer, all of a sudden I saw the hourglass. I saw sand starting to go down to the bottom. When he said, I pictured myself walking in nature, sand starting to go down the bottom. The third thing he says is to do as many random acts of kindness. And I saw myself it was a 7-Eleven store, and I was picking up someone's Snickers bar wrapper. It was so specific. It was a Snickers bar wrapper. And I was walking in the store, and I just reached down, picked it up, put it in the trash. Okay, was it my trash? And it did it. Okay, so then I saw sand going down. The fourth thing he said is something practical. He says, talk to other therapists and find out how they ground themselves. He says there's some great grounding techniques that therapists do. And I would say I'm about a B or if I was rating myself of taking care of these four things,
Mm.
trying to keep myself healthy. So now here's the biggest thing that happened to me in my 3 hours, 33 minutes in heaven, Brian. So now I'm starting to get closer to Earth a little bit. And all of a sudden, I'm standing on a cliff. And I recognized the cliff as a cliff I was standing on in a dream I had about 40 years ago or 45 years ago. And in this dream that I had, it was the first dream that I ever wrote down in my life.
Mm.
Um, because it was so powerful. I was on a plane and I crashed on a remote island somewhere, and I was one of about 10 survivors. And as those 10 survivors were getting out of the plane, it was almost like a King Kong or something, or some evil thing was going to just grab us and kill us, and we had to run away from it. So we're running and we run up this mountain. We're going, it's almost like a cartoon mountain. We're going round and round and round. And there was this fear as we were just all running for our lives. And I knew this thing was just going to kill me. So I get to the very top and there's nowhere to go. And I looked down and out of the clouds was coming a, it was funny. It was a hand that was coming up out of the clouds, but it looked like a Pillsbury Doughboy hand, friendly, like, and I knew instinctively at that time in this dream, I says, oh, I can jump to the hand of safety,
Mm.
or I can turn around and face this fear. Okay. And I somehow when I'm having this dream, I knew it was a thing that I had to make the decision. And I said, in the dream, I says, I'm going to turn around and face this fear. And just as I said that, I woke up. Okay.
Mm.
It was like, boom, someone put the pause button on that. And I woke up, I shook my wife even. I says, oh my God, I think I just passed some kind of spiritual test about facing fears or something, and I wrote it all down. So here I am 40, 45 years later, having this life between life thing. I'm coming back down to earth, and all of a sudden I'm on that cliff again. And I told the facilitator, I says, oh my God, this is the cliff where I had to turn around and face my fears, where I could jump to safety. And the facilitator said, well, jump to the hand of safety. And I again, I'm in trance and I'm so emotional. I said, no, I'm going to face my fear. And I turned around, and this close to my face was a man smiling at me, Brian. He says, I love you. I forgive you. And I just felt this, oh man. And I looked behind him, and there were people lined up as far down as I could see down this mountain that were lined up there to each of them give me a hug. And so I stood there on the mountain, and person after person says, I love you. I forgive you. And the
Mm.
last one, Brian, was this little girl. Oh my gosh, I'm just thinking now, it was a little girl with about 8 or 9 years old. She had this hair that went down to her waist. So I wonder if that was my daughter in that other lifetime.
Mm.
Wow, that could have been her when she was younger. But when I saw her, here I'm in trance, and my Regan self is thinking, what did I do to this poor little girl? And that made me start crying like, what did I do? And she just, with these big, beautiful eyes, she held me and she says, I love you. I forgive you. And
Mm.
then boom, all of a sudden I'm out of there and I'm back, on the earth and back in my body. Whew, that was something. But I think what happened there, Brian, is because I decided to do this work, that they wanted me to be a cleaner vehicle for spirit in a sense. And
Mm.
I think having that experience of having all those people that I've done things to in other lifetimes to hug me and tell me they love me and forgive me, I felt as if a giant heavy tank was off my shoulders.
Mm.
In other words, and I feel like I'm like, even now, I feel like I'm kind of floating, instead of so heavy into this life.
Right.
So it was probably unique. I haven't had anybody else have that forgiveness thing that was unique to me, but I think
Mm.
that's the experience that I had to have. Um, but when people have this experience, oh yeah, the second time I went over there, I actually had one of the questions written down. I wanted to get some work done. So I was over there, and we were 28 of us therapists. We swapped sessions, and I did a session for a therapist in Alabama. We did it over Zoom,
Mm.
which blows our mind because we do these over Zoom all the time, and they're just the same percentage success as we do in person. We didn't know we could do that until COVID. So that was one of the good things that happened about COVID is now we can do sessions all over the world because there's 250 of us, but we're scattered in 45, 46 countries now. And we're only training about 10 or 15 a year. So, we're going to be pretty busy because this is becoming more and more acceptable now. So now I lost my train of thought. Okay. What was I starting to say, Brian?
I'm not sure where you were going with that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The beautiful thing. Oh, yes. Yes. We traded about COVID. Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
therapists, we all asked the same questions by different councils because we all have separate councils.
Mm-hmm.
It's about COVID. Then we came back and coalesced everything, put it into a PowerPoint presentation and everything. Just a sidebar on that. On the other side, in the bigger picture of things, Brian, COVID was not even a big deal. They said, well, it's just something that you guys have to go through down there. It's a balancing of things. It's whatever. We asked about the vaccines, and they said, well, it's personal choice. If you want to take it, maybe it'll help you, and if not, So in the bigger scheme of things, it's just something we're going through. First of all, they said all those people that died, they're back home, they're fine. So what's to worry about? They're home, they're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so when I was finishing up, I asked them, I said, why are you allowing people now to come to see this part of heaven? I says, these 6 stations, so far we've identified 6 stations, and we might not have time to talk about them all today, but on another show maybe. I says, is this it? Is this kind of heaven like this?
Mm-hmm.
And my guide at the time, he was sitting down and he jumps up and he goes, like, you haven't seen anything yet. So I said, is this like Heaven 101? He goes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I said, why are you allowing us to bring people? He says, we love when you bring people here because it's a very important now for the earth right now, because earth is going through major changes right now. And everybody needs to be on task at whatever their mission is to help humanity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to come here so they can learn 3 things. First of all, heaven is real. Okay. Because people, even though you kind of believe it's real, you do it through faith, there's always that little bit of you that wonders, is it really real? Okay, people come here, they find out heaven is real. They want you to realize you're an immortal soul. Okay. And that the 4th thing's actually, the 3rd thing is that realize you're never alone, because you've always got your guide. You've got people up here that can help you if you're just open to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the, I'm thinking now, and the 3rd thing, which is now the 4th thing, as you realize, oh yeah, that you have a mission and purpose,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
your life not just happenstance. Like Brian, I would guess that if you had a session now, you're going to find out that part of your mission was to come down and be a light worker, just like what you're doing with in talking about this and helping other people. And I'm sure there's probably people out there now listening to the podcast, and maybe some of them for the first time today. And because of your podcast now, all of a sudden they're thinking about their higher self. They're thinking about, gosh, what is my mission? Or wow, I know that my so-and-so who passed away, I know they're just fine. And I know that I'm not going to ever die, but I'm just going to transform and go back home again.
Right.
And just knowing that. So on the 2nd session I did, this was kind of interesting. So I'm sitting at the same chair right here. We're doing it on Zoom. So part of me is going, I don't know if I'm really there. I mean, I'm seeing these images and stuff, but I feel like I'm too much Regan at this desk and not there, even though I'm hearing these things and I'm seeing these images. But then all of a sudden the council moved apart, and in walks Michael Newton, who I never met him because he died the year before I had my training.
Hmm.
When he walked in, here I am at my desk right here. I had so much emotion. I started crying uncontrollably in the session. And so my monkey mind now says, okay, Regan, you're there. You're not having this. You're not making up this. You're not just seeing this is not going to create this. You're crying your eyes out right now. But I think it was this connection. And what Michael did was he came down from there. He had me kneel down. He took a sword and he knighted me on each shoulder. And he says, I'm happy the work that you're doing, And and then I asked him, I says, well, what should we be concentrating on and everything? And then he said something that's made my session so real to me too, because it was so loving and beautiful.
Hmm.
Michael said, okay, us on the other side here now that are working to help humanity over on heaven on this side, what we're wanting to instill in you, he says, all the other therapists, he says, look, it's nice if someone can have a life between life process and come here. He says, but everybody doesn't need to do that. He says, some people just need to hear like what we're doing today. All they need to hear is somebody who's been there, who they can kind of say, well, this Regan guy sounds like he's real. He's not just making this stuff up. And even that gives them confidence that, yeah, heaven is real. And to get them to think about their mission and stuff. Says, that's what we want people to do. He says, each of us now, just like you, Brian, or me, what we're supposed to be concentrating on is to help somebody in whatever their next step in evolution is. Maybe it's just to read the Bible, or maybe it's to have a religion or some place where you can kind of get some kind of spiritual guidance. Maybe it's to start a meditation practice, or excuse me, or maybe it's just to think about the prayer that Regan said, wake up and connect yourself. He says, everybody doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles of having this life between life process. He says, you just need to try to help. And I had a picture in my mind of this as I'm climbing up a ladder spiritually, and I'm looking down at somebody who's on the rung below me. And it's up to me to reach down with a hand to help pull them up to the next rung. And then I look above me, and there's somebody up there pulling me up. So we each need to help each other. That's with humanity. We need to be more loving and kind and everything that way.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. So Regan, we're coming to the end of our time together. I appreciate you sharing as much as you did about this process. It's really fascinating, and I know it can be life-changing for people that go through it. And as you were talking, I kept thinking about near-death experiences, and it sounds very similar to what people experience in a near-death experience, minus the trauma. So I know a lot of us that have studied near-death experiences, and I've heard people even say, I wish I could have one. You don't want to have one. People have had them say, don't do that. But this is something that we can all experience. So let people know how they can reach out to you, and also tell people, if they get your book, what they'll get from that.
Okay, sure, Brian. Just what you said, this is what we've done here is we found a way to activate the process that happens, the same thing in a near-death experience, but without the death part. So more than one way to get to heaven that way. So that's what's great. And this is so much near-death experiences have changed people's lives because they've got a view of the other side. So they come back a different person because they realize, wow, there's heaven, But this is done in a very scientific way, very organized way, where, you have a list of questions prepared ahead of time. You have a list of people you want to see. And so when you're over there, you're actually there as long as you want. The sessions end naturally. There's just a time over there where people are the session just ends. It just ends naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But you get work done and you really find out what your true purpose is, so that when you come out of a session, you realize it's time to get to work, to be a better person. It's time to add more pluses every day instead of minuses. Now, visit the afterlife.com. It's so simple. Visit theafterlife.com. There's all kinds of videos on there, frequently asked questions.
Mm-hmm.
6 different videos we have on there. There's also about 5 videos we have on past life regression. And then also watch traditional therapy, because a lot of us, we've been knocked around in our lives a lot, and we're dealing with grief, or dealing with having trouble forgiving people for people that have trespassed against us in a sense.
Yeah.
Having problems and things. And traditional therapy now is actually, it's kind of spiritual traditional therapy, because we've now discovered 3 techniques in regular therapy with energy psychology that manipulate the energy in your body to help you with grief, to help you with stress, to help you with things like that. And they work like magic. So sometimes that's part of what we want to do now, is heal ourselves now too, so that we can get on. Okay, so, but watch, I visit theafterlife.com. My book, which is, if you go to my site, you can click it, takes you to Amazon, or go to Amazon. It's 3 hours, 33 minutes in heaven. I
Hmm.
also have another book called Reincarnation is Real, which is about all the current research being done. When you see all the current research and all the proof that's out there, even if you don't believe in reincarnation, part of you is going to go, maybe there's something to this, because we have so much validation now, and just validation, thousands and thousands of cases and everything now. One of them is a book called Before, by Jim Tucker from the University of Virginia. They've been
Hmm.
studying reincarnation for 50 years now. And these are about children that remember past lives. It's not done through hypnosis. It's done by just seeing the children, having them talk about their past lives, and then they send a team to go out and prove that what the children said was true. And it's in the book called Before. So that, because some people think, oh, it's hypnosis, whatever, but that's with just children that just say, "Mom, you're not my real mom,"
Yeah.
and they have all these other experiences. So anyway, the book Reincarnation is Real. Anybody listening to this podcast, if you go to my website, ask for a free copy, I'll send you a free ebook copy of Reincarnation is Real, just for coming and watching the show.
Awesome. Thank you. It's a very generous offer. Well, Regan, thanks so much for being here today.
Brian, great. You're a very gracious host, and I wish you well in your endeavor there. And thank you for being a light worker too, and helping other people. It's admirable. I'm glad you're doing this.
Awesome. Same to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I will. You too. Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Hey there. If you like this episode, come on over and talk about it. Let me know what you liked. If you didn't like this episode, come on over and talk about it. Let me know what you didn't like. Go to grieftogrowth.com/community and look for Talk About the Podcast. I'll see you there.